Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, after 3 years together, OP's world shatters when he discovers his girlfriend cheated with his cousin. Initially meeting at a nightclub, they quickly became serious, with her moving into his apartment. Unaware, his cousin's flirtations escalated, leading to a physical affair. Confronted with evidence, he swiftly ends the relationship and severs ties with both. Despite initial disbelief, friends and family support him, leaving the girlfriend without allies. Now let's get into the story. My girlfriend and I had been together for 3 years before my entire world fell apart around me. I thought that she was the one for me, and I even planned on marrying her. However, she cheated on me with my cousin. To begin with, she and I met at a nightclub 3 years ago. She was the hottest woman there, and I didn't think I stood a chance at getting far with her, but I had to try. Surprisingly, she was interested in me, and we went out the next day. We had been together ever since. She moved into my apartment a year and a half after we started dating. It seemed right, and I didn't question if it was too soon or not because I was head over heels in love with her. My cousin, who used to live down south, ended up accepting a job position in New York where we lived. I was able to talk to my building manager to get a decent apartment set up for him, since he couldn't come to the city to look for one himself. I was stoked for him to be close by. We had always been good friends when we were younger, and we often played games online together. I thought it was going to be nice having family close by. Once he was all settled, we would hang out with each other quite often. He would come over to our apartment because I had a nice gaming setup, and we would play. He was never shy about letting me know he thought my girlfriend was insanely attractive. He was my cousin, so I never thought he would act on any of his feelings, so I would laugh it off and agree with him. I never noticed anything going on with them while I was around. She wouldn't sit next to him, they wouldn't really even talk much, and they seemed to respect each other's personal space. So a few months after he moved in, I was grabbing coffee with a friend. I thought it was just going to be me and one of my college buddies, but he actually showed up with his new girlfriend. I was a little shocked to see him there with her because she was actually my girlfriend's work friend. We had tried to set them up at a party, but we didn't think they were hitting it off very well. Apparently, they had been keeping things low profile because they didn't want to put any pressure on their relationship. I thought it was so funny that they were together, and I wanted to surprise my girlfriend with that news because I knew she'd love it. I texted her and told her that she should come to the cafe because there was a surprise I wanted her to see. I got a message back shortly after that she couldn't because she was hanging out with her friend. The friend she told me she was hanging out with was the one sitting right across from me at the cafe. Obviously, she was lying about what she was doing, but why she was lying was what I couldn't understand. I ended up lying to my friends and telling them that my girlfriend had a migraine and needed me to bring her some medication. So I left the cafe and went right home. When I got there, she was nowhere to be seen. However, I could see that she had makeup on the bed and she had clearly tried on a couple of outfits. I was really nervous that something was going on that I didn't know about, and I needed to talk to someone about it. I walked down the hall to talk to my cousin. There was loud music playing in the background, but I knocked on the door for a minute until he heard me. I heard a lot of shuffling around, but he opened the door a moment later. He tried to laugh it off by telling me that he had company and that he would come over later. Again, I had no reason to think that my girlfriend was cheating on me with my cousin, so I didn't assume it was her in there. I didn't assume it was her until I saw a shirt that I bought her for her birthday on the arm of the couch behind my cousin. I played it cool and I nodded my head and went back to my apartment. As soon as I got there, I looked around for any other signs that she was cheating. I ended up going into her laptop and looking through her Facebook messages with my cousin. Doing that completely broke my heart. I saw that my cousin had reached out to her and asked what it was about me that she liked so much. She told him that she thought I was funny and had a good personality. But he replied saying that I didn't seem like her type. He told her that he was her type. My girlfriend didn't disagree. They were extremely flirty, and at one point she messaged him the classic, "just got out of the shower" message. After that, they sent a couple of suggestive pictures with some very sexual messages. Earlier that day, my cousin had messaged her that he couldn't stop thinking about her and that he needed to be with her. He told her to come up with some excuse, and she used to go to his apartment, and she did. I knew it was over between my girlfriend and I was going to be cutting my cousin off from my life entirely, but I was definitely going out there little tryst to everyone I knew. I took screenshots of everything that I saw, sending them to myself, so I had it in case my girlfriend tried to lie. Luckily, my name was on the lease and hers wasn't because she moved into my apartment, so I would at least get to kick her out. She came home a few hours later, and right away I told her to get out. She was confused, but I told her that I found out about her and my cousin and that I wanted her out of the apartment or I would file a legal complaint. I left for the night and told her that she had 48 hours to leave. While I was away, she and my cousin had both called me dozens of times, but I ignored every single one of them. While I was gone, I gathered all of my relatives into a group chat, and I told them everything about what happened. Everyone was so disappointed in my cousin for doing what he did. His parents were even in the chat. They all apologized profusely, even though they didn't do anything. Shortly after, I got a bunch of messages from my cousin where he was calling me a coward and telling me that he had members of the family messaging him and telling him that he was a scumbag. I didn't really care. He was a scumbag. My girlfriend and I had a lot of the same friends, so I put all of them in a group chat and told them about what happened as well. They were all completely shocked by what they heard, and they were on my side. While I was talking to them, a couple of the girls in the chat told me that my girlfriend was trying to call them to ask for a place to stay. They felt bad, but they said no because they didn't believe that what she did was right. I went back 2 days later, and my girlfriend was out of the apartment. I had no idea where she'd gone because all of our friends had decided to ghost her. I found out that she ended up staying with my cousin. However, their personalities clashed quite a bit, and he ended up kicking her out after a week. From that point, I have no clue where she went. I guess I learned that you really can't put your trust in just anyone, not even family. Today's second story. In this story, after discovering his wife's hidden pregnancy and abortion, a man confronts her and learns she had been having an affair with a coworker. Shocked, he initiates a separation, insisting she move out. Despite her pleas, he prioritizes his own well-being and his daughter's stability. With family support, he gains custody and focuses on rebuilding his life without his ex-wife. Now let's get into the story. So my wife and I have been married for 11 years, and we have 2 daughters aged 10 and 11. The other day, I was online taking care of some minor medical stuff when I noticed some appointments on the list that I wasn't aware of, appointments for my wife. I saw one for her being 6 weeks pregnant and another for her having an abortion. I was completely taken aback by this discovery. Later that night, I decided to ask her about it. I wanted to know if she had any plans to tell me about the pregnancy. Our conversation became a bit intense, with her asking me questions and me trying to understand why she hadn't shared this with me earlier. I mentioned the abortion as well, and we went back and forth discussing how I found out and what led to this situation. Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even considering the possibility of someone else being involved. You see, I had a vasectomy a few years back, and I had a follow-up appointment to confirm that the procedure was successful. Of course, I'm aware that vasectomies can sometimes reverse themselves, but it didn't immediately cross my mind. As the story continues, I'm doing my best to be supportive, even though I'm not particularly upset about anything except for the fact that she kept this for me. Then she drops a bombshell. She confessed that she was afraid to tell me about the pregnancy because she wasn't sure if I was the father. It turns out she's been having unprotected intimate with a coworker in the back of her car. She works nights for the past 6 months. I was completely blindsided by this affair. According to her, she regrets the decision to have an abortion, which happened back in early November. Shockingly, she admits that she continued to be intimate with him, even a couple of times in February. Right now, she's an emotional mess, and although I really want to comfort her, I'm trying to stay strong. It's hard to come to terms with what she's done. She's the one who made these choices, and now she has to face the consequences. I want to make it clear that I don't blame myself for what happened. It was her decision, her actions, and her mistakes. Even though this all unfolded just earlier this week, I'm feeling incredibly torn up inside. I still love this woman deeply, but I can't overlook or forgive what she did. Our 11 years of building a relationship and trust seem to have crumbled in a single day. My priority now is her well-being, but I've come to the realization that I can't be the one to provide that for her anymore. I've already expressed my desire for a separation, and I've asked her to move out. I live in a home that I rent for my mother, and part of the agreement is that I also help take care of my grandmother, who lives with us. It would be incredibly awkward for her to stay here once the rest of the family knows about the situation. However, even if my grandmother didn't live with us, I would still ask her to move out. My mindset is that I didn't cheat, so why should I be the one to uproot my life? It's a difficult and emotional situation, but I know I need to prioritize my own well-being and make decisions that are right for me moving forward. I've reached out to a lawyer, and I'm in the process of gathering information for the separation papers. I've also taken the responsible step of getting tested for STDs, and fortunately, the results so far have been clean. I haven't told my children about the situation yet. My soon-to-be ex wanted to downplay it as just a breakup, but I firmly believe they need to understand the seriousness of a marriage, so I plan to be honest with them about the fact that their mother had a boyfriend. She started crying and told me not to tell anyone about the reason for the breakup, especially not the kids. Her words were falling on deaf ears. I was the one who was supposed to be crying and asking her why she did what she did, but here I am making calls to my immediate family telling them that me and my wife are splitting up, and the reason is because she cheated on me and she is pregnant with another man's child. I still haven't met this man, and I have no intentions to meet him either. He can take my ex and leave my daughters to me. My mother-in-law called me and apologized on behalf of my ex and told her that she was stupid for doing this to such a good man. I didn't know what to say either. I loved her family dearly, and they picked my side too. They said that they completely cut off ties with her and that she deserved to suffer the consequences. I later kicked her out of the house and said I will be taking full custody of the kids, and now she can go live with that coworker of hers. She didn't utter a word after that. This whole experience has been incredibly tough on me. I feel like I'm barely holding myself together, especially today. I'm trying to maintain a strong front in front of my daughters, but there are moments when I have to step away to collect myself. It's been a few weeks since I last heard from my ex, and things have been going pretty well for me. The custody case for my two girls seems to be in my favor, and they are coping with everything remarkably well. I'm relieved that I can finally find happiness in the company of just my girls and myself. Today's third story. In this story, after nearly 20 years together, OP discovered his wife's infidelity through an old journal. She had a 5-year affair with a neighbor, manipulating their daughter into secrecy. Confrontation led to admissions, divorce, and custody decisions. Despite his children's continued relationship with their mother, his disdain for her actions, particularly involving their daughter, remained strong. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I had been together for almost 20 years when we ended things. It was by far one of the most difficult decisions I ever had to make, but I know that it was the right one. We met when we were in our early 20s, and it was pretty much love at first sight for me. I saw her and thought she was perhaps one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen, so I approached her and asked her out. She actually ended up rejecting me the first time I asked her. It stung, but I moved on with my life. Even though she turned me down, I still found my mind wandering back to her from time to time. About 3 weeks after our first encounter, I ran into her again at the grocery store. I recognized her right away, and I thought that it was almost like fate that I ran into her. What struck me was that she recognized me too. I thought she would have instantly forgotten about me and carried on with some other person, but that wasn't the case. We started talking at the grocery store, and I decided I would ask her out a second time. This time, she said yes. I always loved telling everybody about how we met in our story because I thought it highlighted that we were meant to be together. For 20 years in our marriage, everything was flawless. We made good money, we had a beautiful home, we had 4 children together, and everyone was happy and healthy. We had our fair share of arguments, but it was always something that we worked through and took the time to understand the root cause of the arguments to improve our relationship for the future. There was a point in our marriage where it felt like we were fighting almost every day. I remember thinking that it was one of the worst times in my life. Every day I was afraid that she and I would be getting a divorce. It was that bad. We ended up going to marriage counseling, and it helped us work through a lot of our issues. My wife and I recently decided that we wanted to put our house on the market and move into a new neighborhood. There were a lot of things we needed to do before listing it. One of the big things we did was to make sure that we had a good relationship. With biggest ones that we had was getting rid of 20 years worth of accumulated junk. One day, I went up to the attic to go through some of the boxes we had stashed away up there to determine what needed to be trashed or sold. I found a box of my wife's old things and started going through it. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but rather I was just sorting through it. At the bottom of the box, I found an old journal. All the time that I knew my wife, I had never known her to keep a journal or a diary or anything like that. Honestly, I thought it might have been something from her teenage years. I admit it might have been an invasion of privacy, but I let my curiosity win and I peeked inside. When I saw the dates on the entries, I realized they were from the time we were married. I almost decided to put the journal away and pretend like I hadn't seen it. It felt kind of invasive reading about thoughts that she had while we were together. But then something stood out to me before I put it down, and they prompted me to keep reading. She continuously mentioned someone in the entries that she called Jay, obviously. I'm not giving my name for privacy reasons, but it does not start with the letter J. It was clear that she and this J person were in some kind of a relationship. There were detailed entries about how she would pretend to go to a book club with some of the other ladies in her neighborhood, when in reality she was with him. She mentioned how the intimate with him was the best that she ever had, and most of that was from sneaking around. I was heartbroken reading about it. She wrote about how she felt like she was falling for him, and she didn't know what to do because of me. She felt like she had met the love of her life, and it wasn't me. As if that wasn't enough to make me want to divorce her right then and there. And in one of the later entries, she mentioned that our daughter saw her with her boyfriend. I was absolutely infuriated when I read that. She had been so careless with her affair that our child caught her with another man. In the entry, she mentioned how she was able to convince my daughter not to say anything because she didn't want to divorce me. She manipulated my daughter into lying to me throughout many years of her life. It was clear from the journal entries that the boyfriend knew he was sneaking around with a married woman. The anonymity that she held within the journal for him made me suspect that he was someone she was protecting. I wasn't a hot-headed or violent guy, so it's not like I would have done anything to hurt him. Instead, I thought she didn't want his life to be ruined if someone found out. I didn't know what to do. As much as I wanted to rush down the stairs and confront my wife, I needed to make sure we were handling it the right way. On top of that, I needed to figure out who the guy was. If he was one of our friends or a neighbor who was married with children, I needed to know. I left the attic with the journal in my hands, and I hid it in my dresser. I was going to be bringing that to the divorce attorney. My wife was out of the house, so I took the time to look for her. That I had alone to search through her social media profiles and emails. When I did, I found someone who I suspected of being the man. I had nearly forgotten he existed. He was someone that my wife and I would go on double dates with years before. He was one of our neighbors and a good friend at a certain point. My wife was close with him, and he and I would watch football games together from time to time. My wife came to me one day and told me she didn't want anything to do with him anymore. I questioned her at the time and asked her about what happened, and she just told me that his wife made some unsavory comments about how we were raising our children. I was never given an option to talk to them about it. My wife put her foot down and said that we were through with them. I respected her decision about it. I wasn't super invested in her friendship at the time, so I didn't care that much. Looking back now, I think that something happened with her and the good friends I had banded. On top of that, a lot of the problems we were having in our marriage were around that time. Everything made sense looking back. All of the puzzle pieces were there, but I didn't know how to put them together. We still lived in the same neighborhood as them. They were only a few houses down from us. We ran into them from time to time, but we all tended to ignore each other. I played it cool after I found out what I did while I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. My wife didn't suspect anything, and I just pretended like everything was normal. A couple of days after I found out, I was out front mowing the lawn when I saw the other man drive away from his house. I had no idea where he was going or when he would be back, but I started walking over to his house before I could think better of it. It was a perfect opportunity to talk to his wife and see if she ever suspected anything was going on. I knocked on the door, and she was surprised to see me, but she welcomed me inside and poured me a glass of iced tea. After a few minutes of small talk, I asked her outright if she ever suspected her husband cheated on her. She was taken aback by my question, but after a couple of moments, I think she realized that I was asking for a reason. She told me that there was a time when she did suspect he was cheating, and she thought that it was with my wife. She had been very uncomfortable with their relationship, and her husband had promised her that nothing was going on. Regardless, she asked them not to see each other anymore. Apparently, that's why the friendship between all four of us really ended. What she said confirmed in my mind that her husband was the man in the journals. I explained to her everything that I discovered, and I watched her heartbreak as she listened. I felt awful for telling her, but she deserved to know the truth. We came up with a plan to confront them together. I went home later that afternoon and told my wife that I ran into the old neighbor outside and that we wanted to get together for dinner. My wife was against it at first, but I told her that we needed to put the past behind us. I was able to convince her to come along with me. When we got there, the other couple was in the kitchen cooking dinner. The other man was surprised to see me, and there was some uncomfortable energy between everyone. I did notice that my wife and the other guy hardly even made eye contact during everything. We all sat down for dinner, and when the conversation stilled, I brought up how we were selling the house, and I was looking through the attic and found my wife's old journal. She nearly spit up her wine when I mentioned finding that. She seemed to be frustrated that I read it, but I ignored her and revealed the contents of it. When I was done, I outright asked her and the other man how their affair started. They tried to deny it, but there was no use. They admitted to everything, and my wife was pleading with me to leave so we could talk about it in private. I told her that I didn't want to talk about it in private, and I forced her to tell me everything right there. Apparently, through all of the double dates that we went on, she and the other guy started to develop feelings. One night while they were over at our house and we had a few glasses of wine, they were getting a little handsy while they were alone. From there, they had intimate for the first time, and they continued a 5-year-long affair. My wife developed feelings that the other man didn't have. She wanted to leave me to be with him, but he didn't want to leave his wife. Because of that, my wife cut everything off. Both myself and my neighbor told them that we didn't want anything to do with them after this. There was no coming back from it, and we would be leaving. I told my wife that I had already been talking to a divorce attorney. She broke down and cried, pleading with me to forgive her. She told me that it was one of her biggest regrets, and she would take it all back in an instant if she could. On top of everything, I told her how disgusting it was that she involved our daughter in the lie. Over the next several months, we went about getting our divorce. Throughout all of it, my wife tried to convince me just to go to counseling and to forgive her. I wasn't listening to any of it. We already had the house listed for sale, so we agreed it would be best to continue with that. Wave split the sale cost of the house, and half of that was all she was awarded in the divorce. I didn't know her anything beyond that point, and because she involved our daughter in the affair and convinced her to lie, I was ruled in favor of custody. My children still see their mother, but I have been working with them as best as I can to make sure they're not going to be too damaged by all of this. My daughter, who was involved in the lie, has expressed how sorry she was for keeping it for so long. She felt guilty throughout the years, but she didn't know what to do because she didn't want to destroy the family. At this point, I have no love for my ex. Had she not involved our daughter, I might have been able to look back at some memories fondly. But the guilt that she put on our child is abhorrent, and I can't stand to be around her because of that.